every story ends, but the old ones end like sunsets, slowly and beautifully, leaving colour behind in the mind. This is part 3, the final chapter in our sleep story journey through Ireland's mythology, where gods fade into legend and legend into lullaby. We follow Fionn Mac-Cool, who tasted the salmon of wisdom and lit the Druids' fire of understanding. Beneath the green hills and drifting mists of Ireland, the fairy folk still walk unseen, keeping their ancient courts where the worlds of magic and memory touch. And at last we ride with Oisín and Niamh across the sea to Tir na nOg, the land of eternal youth, where time itself forgets to pass. But what happens when even the immortal must learn to let go? Tonight we listen for the final echoes in the twilight of the gods. Good evening, traveller, and welcome to Realm and Reason. If you'd like to drift through more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe before you fall asleep. Now take a deep breath in and let it go. Before we begin, let's put your body to rest. Start by resting your attention at the top of your head. Notice the sensations, not just the image of the body, but the feeling of it. Slowly move down through your body, spending about 5 seconds on each part. With every exhale, let that area soften. Imagine your breath travelling through each place you focus on, releasing tension as it flows. Keep moving downward through your eyebrows, your cheeks, your neck and shoulders, your hands and fingers, down through your legs to the very tips of your toes. And now, release the whole body, let yourself drift and rest. The Salmon of Wisdom and the Druids' fire. Long before the castles and cities of Ireland rose from stone, when the island was still a vast green wilderness of forest and fog, the land was called Éire, the ancient name for Ireland, the Emerald Isle. Mists drifted between the trees like ghosts of memory, and rivers carried songs older than humankind. The Druids, wise men and women who served as teachers, poets and philosophers, walked the land as guardians of sacred knowledge. They believed that wisdom was not learned from books or scrolls, but drawn from the rhythm of the earth itself, from the movement of stars, the murmur of streams, and the quiet patience of trees. It was in this world that a boy named Demne, who would one day be known as Fionn Mac-Cool, or Finn Mac-Cool in modern English, was born. Fionn's birth was shadowed by both greatness and tragedy. His father, Cuail, was the leader of the Fianna Éireann, an order of elite warrior poets who defended Ireland and upheld a code of honour that valued courage, loyalty, and hospitality above all. His mother, Muirna, was of noble lineage, but her marriage to Cuail angered the High King and the rival clans. When jealousy and politics turned to bloodshed, Cuail was slain by Gul Mac Morna, a powerful warrior who then claimed leadership of the Fianna. To protect her unborn child, Muirna fled into exile, seeking refuge among druids and healers deep in the heart of the forest. There, hidden among ancient oaks and clear springs, Demne was raised in secrecy by 2 remarkable women. Bothmol, a druidess and seer known for her wisdom, and Leath Luxra, a fierce warrior and hunter. These 2 foster mothers became the foundation of his world. From Bothmol he learned the mysteries of nature, the cycles of moon and tide, the language of birds, and the sacred fires that connected the human spirit to the divine. From Leoth Lucera, he learned strength, discipline, and the art of survival. She taught him how to move silently through ferns and how to listen not only with his ears but with his heart. The boy's senses sharpened until he could tell the hour by the colour of the sky and the approach of rain by the scent of moss. Under their care, Demna grew into a graceful and thoughtful youth, quick to learn and slow to anger. He asked questions endlessly: why the rivers curved as they did, why fire danced and water stilled, why some men grew cruel when others sought peace. His teachers told him that to know the world one must first love it, and to love it one must first listen. These lessons, simple and quiet, would one day shape the soul of Ireland's greatest hero. As he came of age, the young man took the name Fionn, meaning fair or bright, both for his pale hair and for the light in his spirit. Yet he carried within him the longing to know his destiny. He left his forest home and wandered through valleys and along river banks, guided by dreams and whispers in the wind. The world beyond the trees was wide and filled with both beauty and danger. He met shepherds who spoke of wars and poets who sang of lost kings. He heard tales of the river Boyne, where it was said that wisdom itself slept beneath the surface. Beside that river lived an old poet and druid named Finnegas, whose name still echoes through Irish legend. Finnegas had spent 7 long years trying to catch the salmon of knowledge, a sacred fish said to have eaten the hazelnuts that fell from the 9 trees surrounding Conla's well, also called the Well of Wisdom. Those nuts contained the essence of all learning, and whoever first tasted the salmon's flesh would gain all the wisdom of the world. The river where Finnegas fished was the River Boyne, which still flows today through eastern Ireland, its waters forever linked to stories of magic and enlightenment. When Fionn came upon the Druid's small hut, he greeted him with respect and asked for shelter. Finnegas looked at him closely, sensing something unusual in the boy's calm gaze. "You have the look of one who listens more than he speaks," he said. "Stay with me, help me tend my nets, and perhaps you'll learn what patience truly means." So Fionn stayed. The seasons turned, and under Finnegas's guidance he studied not only words and songs but the silent language of the world. He learned how to read the patterns of ripples on water, and how the wind carried messages from faraway lands. The Druid spoke often of wisdom, not as something to be possessed, but as something that passes through those who are ready. "Knowledge," Finnegas said one evening, "is the flame that burns, wisdom is the light it casts." Fionn listened and pondered. He saw how Finnegas treated every living thing with reverence. The fish he did not catch, the trees he thanked before cutting their branches for firewood. Patience, the old man said, was the first step toward true insight. Then, one bright morning, the long-awaited moment came. Finnegas called out from the riverbank, his voice trembling with awe. In his net shimmered a salmon unlike any other, its scales glowing with the light of dawn. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. "At last," whispered Finnegas, "the salmon of knowledge." With reverence he lifted it from the water and said to Fionn, "Prepare a fire. The gift of the gods has come to me, and I will taste it tonight." Fionn built the fire carefully, gathering dry wood and fanning the flames. The smell of smoke and river air mingled, sweet and sharp. As the salmon cooked, the skin began to crisp, and a drop of oil hissed from its flesh. It splashed onto Fionn's thumb, burning him. Without thinking, he placed his thumb in his mouth to cool it. The world shifted. In that instant, Fionn felt the universe open around him. He saw the turning of the stars, the weaving of fate, the memory of every leaf and stone. The rivers sang in his ears, and he understood their words. All knowledge flowed through him like water through light. When he blinked, tears came to his eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming beauty of what he now perceived. Finnegas saw the change in him and sighed, a smile softening his face. "You have tasted what was meant for you," he said gently. "It was never mine to claim. I was only the keeper of the path until you arrived." From that day on, whenever Fionn pressed his thumb to his teeth, wisdom would rise within him like flame through kindling. Yet he did not boast of his gift. He continued to serve the old poet until his apprenticeship was complete, learning that wisdom without humility is an empty crown. Eventually, Fionn's journey led him back into the world of men. By then, tales of the Fianna Éireann still echoed through Ireland, those bands of noble warriors who protected the land and upheld justice. The Fianna were bound by a sacred code. They must be both strong and learned, fearless in battle yet gentle in peace. They trained not only with swords but with poetry, music and law, for they believed that strength without wisdom led only to ruin. Among them, Fionn would soon find his destiny. At that time, the Fianna were still commanded by Gul Mac Morna, the very man who had slain Fionn's father years before. When Fionn appeared before them, they did not recognize him. He was no longer the hidden child of prophecy, but a calm young man with eyes like clear sky. The High King of Ireland, Cabra Fixer, challenged him to prove his worth, and Fionn's wisdom guided him through every test. Whether it was deciphering riddles, tracking deer through unseen trails, or sensing deceit among men. In each challenge, he triumphed not through strength, but through perception. When the truth of his heritage was revealed, Gul Mac Morna knelt before him and offered his sword. Rather than strike him down, Fionn lifted Gul to his feet. "The past cannot be mended by blood," he said. "Let our strength serve Ireland, not our vengeance." From that day, Fionn became leader of the Fianna, uniting rival clans through honour and wisdom. Under his guidance, they became protectors not only of Ireland's borders, but of its spirit. The Fianna roamed the wild lands of Leinster, Connacht and Ulster, regions still known in Ireland today, guarding travellers, hunting in sacred forests, and composing poetry by the fireside. At night their campfires were said to burn with the light of truth, the Druids' fire, symbolising enlightenment and clarity. Fionn taught his warriors that wisdom was like fire. It must be tended carefully, shared generously, and never used to harm. He reminded them of what Finnegas had taught him, that every man and woman, no matter how humble, carried a spark of the divine within. The Fianna's code became a reflection of Ireland's highest virtues: bravery, hospitality, poetry, and justice. They were heroes not only for their battles, but for their compassion and understanding of the world's balance. One evening, as the Fune rested beside a glen, a young recruit asked Fune, "How do we know when we are wise?" Fune smiled and looked toward the stars. "When you no longer need to ask," he replied. "Wisdom is not a prize, but a way of seeing." Years passed, and the stories of Fune Mac Cool spread across the island. He became a figure of both legend and inspiration, a leader who could foresee danger before it arrived and heal disputes with a word. Some tales say he could understand the language of birds, that he could call the wind to stillness or fire to dance. Others say that when he spoke, rivers slowed to listen. In his later years, Fune became more than a hero. He became a philosopher, a bridge between the world of Druids and the age of kings. He taught that knowledge without compassion was hollow, and that true wisdom came from harmony with nature. When he sat beside the fire at night, the flames seemed to shimmer with a deeper light, the reflection of the Salmon of Wisdom forever alive in his spirit. Even as the old faith faded and new beliefs took root in Ireland, the story of Fune endured. Parents told their children that wisdom must be earned through patience and humility, that every river carries echoes of the Boyne, and that those who listen with open hearts may still hear the salmon's song beneath the ripples. And perhaps it is so. On quiet evenings, when the river Boyne glows gold beneath the setting sun, some claim they have seen a flash of silver beneath its surface. The water moves, and for a moment it seems that something ancient and knowing glides just below the light. If one listens closely, they might hear a whisper, soft as a sigh, gentle as a thought, that says wisdom, like the river, flows forever. It cannot be captured, only followed. For wisdom, like the Druids' fire, burns eternal, shifting, patient and pure, guiding those who seek it with open eyes and open hearts. The fairy folk and hidden kingdoms. There are places in Ireland where the mist lingers even after the morning sun has risen, valleys where the grass seems to shimmer, and the air carries a stillness that feels almost sacred. In such places, people once said, the veil between the worlds is thin. To walk there at dawn or dusk is to walk not just upon the earth of Ireland, but at the edge of another realm entirely, a realm of wonder, beauty and peril. This is the world of the Oisín, the fairy folk of Irish tradition, whose kingdoms lie hidden beneath hills and hollow mounds. The name Oisín means the people of the mounds. According to legend, they are the descendants of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the divine race who once ruled Ireland before retreating into the other world, a parallel dimension existing alongside our own. When the Milesians, ancestors of the modern Irish people, arrived on the island, they defeated the Tuatha Dé Danann in battle. Rather than leave the land they loved, the Tuatha withdrew into the earth, taking their magic with them. They became the Shining Ones, the She, guardians of nature and memory, existing just out of human sight. In modern geography, Ireland is dotted with thousands of grassy mounds known as Roths or She, such as Newgrange in County Meath or Knockanee in County Limerick. These ancient sites, dating back thousands of years, are believed to be doorways to the other world. Based on what we know from archaeology, Places like Newgrange are Neolithic passage tombs raised by early farming communities. Later fairy beliefs layered myth upon these older monuments without erasing their human origins. Folklore tells that to disturb them, to build upon them, to cut their trees or to block a fairy path is to invite misfortune. Even in recent centuries, road builders have diverted highways to avoid crossing a known fairy fort. Farmers still think twice before removing a lone hawthorn tree, for such trees are said to stand as fairy sentinels between realms. The Oisín are not always seen, but they are always near. They dwell in great underground palaces of light and song, where music flows like water, and time itself moves differently. What seems a night among them may be 100 years in the mortal world. They are beautiful beyond description, tall, radiant beings with eyes that shimmer like moonlit pools. Yet beauty in fairy lore is never without danger. The Oisín are proud and easily offended. They honour gifts and courtesy, but punish arrogance, greed, or those who forget respect for the unseen. The old tales say there are two courts among them, the Seelie court who are fair and protective of humankind, and the Unseelie court who are darker, mischievous, and at times cruel. Though this division is later and more common in Scottish folklore, Irish stories share a similar sense of duality in tone and outcome. That note keeps the tradition accurate while acknowledging overlap across Celtic regions. Some fairies bring blessings, music, harvest, and healing. Others bring storms, madness, or loss. Both are part of the balance of nature, and both remind mortals that every gift carries its price. Ireland, known in ancient times as Éire, is a country where the landscape itself seems alive with myth. From the flat limestone plains of the Barron to the sweeping peaks of Ben Bulben in County Sligo, each region carries stories of spirits and gods. In the Morna Mountains, it's said that fairies dance upon the ridges during full moons, their footsteps leaving circles of flattened grass. Along the shores of Lochsgur near County Limerick, the goddess Unia, a queen among the Oisín and a symbol of love, fertility and summer, was once believed to rise from the lake's waters, bringing light to the land. The air in these places feels different. Locals sometimes speak of thin places, areas where the veil between worlds feels lighter, where sound travels strangely and the wind carries whispers. In such spots, animals may grow restless, and the human heart senses something vast and invisible moving nearby. To this day, travellers speak softly when walking the hills at twilight, unwilling to disturb the balance of the unseen. The Irish people have long treated these landscapes with reverence. To them, every stone and stream might conceal a doorway. The scent of heather and sea salt mingles with mystery, and even the smallest ripple in a pond can seem like a signal from another world. The natural and the supernatural are not separate in Irish tradition. They are threads of the same tapestry. The fairy courts are said to be ruled by radiant queens and kings, each tied to a regional season. Unia, goddess of the sun and summer, was revered as a bringer of love and prosperity. Her mound at Lochsgur remains a sacred site where midsummer fires once blazed in her honour. Her counterpart, Clayuna, is known as the Queen of the Banshees. Her beauty was said to be unmatched, her song able to calm storms. She dwelled along the southern coast, often near Glandor Harbour, and it was believed that the sound of the sea there was her voice calling to lost souls. In the west, the waves belonged to Manannan MacLear, god of the sea and keeper of the misty borders between worlds. His silver chariot was said to glide across the ocean's surface, and his cloak of invisibility could hide entire islands from mortal sight. Some say he still guards the way to Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth, guiding the worthy and concealing the reckless. These figures remind us that the Ishi are more than sprites. They're echoes of ancient gods remembered in softer, humbler form. Within the fairy realms themselves, time and season bend. Scholars believe such tales reflect humanity's longing for balance and beauty, unspoiled by decay. In the courts of the Ishi, feasts never end, music never falters, and joy is eternal. But the price for entering is one's return. For mortals who wander too far into their world seldom come back unchanged. Every culture that speaks of fairies also speaks of their rules. In Ireland, etiquette toward the Ishi is both art and survival. To thank a fairy outright is considered rude. It implies the favour is repaid. This detail appears widely in Irish oral tradition, and could imply a worldview where exchanges with the other world are never fully settled. Instead, one should say, "May good fortune follow you," or simply bow. Iron, a symbol of human craft, offends them deeply, for it breaks the balance of nature's magic. And above all, one must never accept food or drink from the fair folk. To eat their food is to bind oneself to their realm, never able to return to mortal soil. There are tales of travellers who vanished after tasting the honeyed wine of a fairy feast, or musicians who followed a glowing doorway into the earth, only to emerge generations later, unchanged in age, but strangers in their own homeland. It is said that words themselves are bridges between worlds, and so one must speak carefully where the Ishi might hear. A careless word can open a door, a kind word can close one. Among the oldest and most haunting fairy legends are those of the changelings, fairy children left in place of stolen human infants. In some tellings, the fairies take babies out of longing, for their own kind cannot bear the warmth of mortal life. In others, the theft is a punishment or a whim. A mother might wake to find her bright, laughing child replaced with a silent, pale stranger who would neither grow nor thrive. There are stories of women who kept vigil through the night, guarding their cradles with iron scissors or burning embers, reciting prayers learned from both priest and druid. One old tale from County Kerry tells of a mother who heard music drifting through the window, a tune so beautiful it made her weep. She followed the sound to the forest's edge, where she saw her true child dancing among the fair folk, glowing like a flame. But when she called out, the vision vanished, leaving only the wind. She returned home to find her changeling gone, the cradle empty and a single white feather upon the sheets. Though such stories are full of sorrow, they carry a gentler meaning. Based on what we know from folklore studies, these tales sometimes echoed attempts to explain illness or difference in eras before medicine. Within the tradition, they also honour a parent's endurance and the mystery of love. They speak of the fragility of love and the mystery of loss, and of how even grief can be touched by wonder. Across Ireland, Invisible roads called fairy paths criss-cross the landscape. These are said to be the routes the Oisín travel between their mounds, especially during the festivals of Samhain, the ancient Celtic New Year, now Halloween, Beltane, the May Fire Festival, and Midsummer's Eve. On these nights the veil between worlds grows thin, and strange lights dance across the hills. Many still swear that they've seen them, soft floating orbs that move with purpose, weaving between trees like lanterns carried by unseen hands. Builders in rural Ireland often avoid placing houses or fences across these paths. Modern reports occasionally note roads and fences being rerouted to respect a hawthorn or wraith. While individual cases vary, the persistence of the practice could imply how belief and landscape stewardship intertwine. There are countless stories of misfortune following those who dared. In one, a farmer near County awfully cut down a solitary hawthorn that blocked his field, ignoring the warnings of his neighbours. The next morning his cattle were found scattered and ill, his tools rusted, and the hawthorn stump split cleanly in two as though by lightning. Whether coincidence or curse, such tales still whisper through the countryside. The portals themselves are said to shimmer like mist above the grass. Sometimes they appear as rings of mushrooms, fairy circles that glow faintly under moonlight. To step inside is to gamble with fate. A moment of awe may cost a lifetime in the mortal world. The music of the Oisín is said to be both blessing and burden. The fairy music, soft and haunting, can stir the soul like no mortal tune. Those who hear it are forever changed. Musicians who try to capture its melody often find their art touched by something divine. Many Irish traditional tunes, particularly slow airs played on fiddle or harp, are said to have been learned from encounters to the fair folk. One old legend tells of a piper named Aidan who followed the sound of a song drifting through the mist near Ben Bulben. He disappeared for 3 days and returned with a tune that no one had ever heard before, a melody that could make even stones weep. Some say he had played with the court of the Oisín. Others believe he had simply dreamed it. Either way, the song lived on, passed from musician to musician, a piece of the other world stitched into human memory. Many scholars interpret the Oisín as echoes of pre-Christian deities, their worship transformed but not forgotten. The Tuatha De Danann, once gods of the land and sky, became guardians of the hidden places. Their retreat into the mounds could imply a merging of myth and memory as Ireland shifted from paganism to Christianity. Annalistic texts and monastic compilations preserve earlier material while reframing it for a Christian audience. The monks who preserve these tales often reimagine the gods as spirits or angels, yet their essence survived. In this way, the fairies became a bridge between Ireland's old faith and its new. Even now, belief in the fair folk endures in quiet ways. In parts of Ireland, lone hawthorn trees are still left untouched. Roads curve to spare ancient mounds, and festivals held where music, fire, and storytelling honour the unseen. During Samhain, when autumn fogs roll low and fires burn in doorways, people still say that the veil grows thin. Candles flicker in windows, guiding the wandering souls and perhaps the fair folk themselves. Ireland's folklore continues to inspire art, poetry, and film. Writers like W.B. Yeats collected and retold these legends, ensuring their survival. In the hush of an Irish evening, it isn't hard to understand why such stories endure. The land feels alive with presence, mysterious, benevolent, and eternal. Walk any Irish countryside at twilight, and you may still feel it, the hush that falls between daylight and dark when the world seems to hold its breath. A soft breeze brushes through the grass. A flicker of light dances on a distant hill. Perhaps it is only the mist, or perhaps something older still watches, unseen yet near, as it always has. For in Ireland the fair folk are never far away. They live in the rustle of leaves, in the shimmer of moonlit water, in the songs of the wind that sweep across the heathered hills. They're reminders that the world is larger than what we see, that every shadow holds a secret, every silence a story, and if you listen closely enough, you might just hear the faint, laughing music of the Oisín echoing across time, calling you to remember the hidden kingdoms that lie just beyond the veil. Twilight of the Gods, the departure to Tir na Nog. When the last embers of day sink behind the western sea and the hedgerows grow quiet, Ireland seems to remember itself. The wind slows over the grass, the cattle stop their soft talk in the fields, and the evening light gathers like a blessing on stone and water. In that hour between what has been and what is coming, the island feels like a threshold. People have long said that Ireland, known in its oldest tongue as Are, the name for the land we now call Ireland, was shaped by two great tides, the age of the old gods and the age that came after. Tonight we walk the shoreline where those tides meet. The old gods were called the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. To understand their fading, we should first remember who they were. They were bringers of craft and art, guardians of sacred knowledge, shining figures who loved this island so fiercely that when the Milesians, the ancestors of the modern Irish, won the land, the Tuatha did not flee across the sea. Instead, as the stories tell it, they stepped sideways into the other world, a realm that runs beside our own like a secret river under grass. They withdrew beneath the hollow hills and into the Shee, the mounds, becoming the Oisín. Fair folk, bright and proud, present but unseen, remembered yet apart. In the medieval compilation known as the Leber Gabalaran, Book of Invasions, the incoming Milesians take worldly rule while the Tuatha keep the hidden realm. Later folklore preserves this division as a way of holding both histories at once. Based on what we know from the old compilations, this could imply that the memory of earlier deities remained alive in gentler form, folded into the landscape and the customs of the people. In those days, the world felt stitched together by song. The Druids tended fires on hilltops to greet the sun, and poets carried the names of rivers as if they were charms, Boyne and Shannon, Barrow and Suir. The sea god Manannan Mac Lir, whose name still tastes of wave salt, was said to rule the misty roads between worlds. He wore a cloak that could hide islands, and his silver chariot rolled across the ocean like a pathway. It was he, some say, who kept the gates to Tir na Nog, the land of youth, where no one grows old and sorrow loosens its hold on the heart. Tir na Nog is not a single island so much as a promise. It appears as a shore where the light looks new, or as a plain where the grass holds the green of spring forever. In some tellings it lies west beyond the horizon, in others it opens from a ring of trees or a hill-lit door. Time behaves differently there. Days do not measure things in the old way. Music does not end. Lovers walk beneath an evening that never quite becomes night. It could be that the stories place Tir na Nog where every human hope rests, in the place where beauty is safe and time is kind. But even the promise of a perfect shore cannot hush a longing to belong, and that is where the tale of Oisín begins. Oisín, his name meaning little deer, was the son of Fionn mac Cúail, the bright-headed leader of the Fianna, Ireland's legendary band of warrior poets. The Fianna guarded the land and its guests. They kept an honour code as strict as winter and as generous as harvest. In their company, courage was measured not only by the strength of an arm, but by the truth of a word and the hospitality of a fire. Fionn himself, as many listeners will remember, once gained deep wisdom by tasting the salmon of knowledge on the river Boyne, and he led with a mind as steady as a lighthouse flame. Oisín grew tall in the glens and learned to hear the land as his father did, to read the rivers talk, to trust the quiet of trees, to know when a wind meant weather and when it meant something else. He could make verses that softened tempers and a bow shot that would bring down a deer without frightening its herd. He was the kind of hero Ireland loves. Strong, yes, but more than that, bright of heart. It was on a day of clear weather that she arrived, riding a white horse over the waves as if water were a road. Her name was Niamh of the Golden Hair. In many tellings she is named as the daughter of Manannán mac Lir. In others, her lineage is left undefined. Both strands circulate in the tradition. She is sometimes called the daughter of Manannán mac Lir, which places her among the nobility of the other world. At other times the texts leave her lineage unspoken, as if beauty needs no pedigree. Her hair was said to shine like sunlight on sea stone, and her eyes held the colour of a westering sky. She came to Ireland not in conquest, but with an invitation, to find the one whose name the winds themselves carried to her, and to bring him where sorrow sleeps. She found Oisín in the company of the Fianna beside a lake bright with sky. The horse she rode was no ordinary creature. It could travel the sea as easily as meadow grass, and carried the scent of apple blossom. She called to Oisín by name, and all talk around the camp fell quiet. Fionn, who could see truth hidden in a lie like a spark in ash, watched and said nothing. He knew that some door was opening in the air. "Come with me," said Niamh. "Come to Tir na Nog, where summer never dies and songs never end. Come where no one wakes to grey in their hair or weight in their bones." There are decisions that don't feel like decisions at all. Oisín's life had been a preparation for this moment, though he could not have said how. He looked at the faces of his companions, at his father whose wisdom kept the Fianna steady as a ship in weather, and he felt the tug of the unknown like the tide pulling a small boat toward the mouth of a river. He climbed onto the white horse behind Niamh, and together they rode toward the sea. The horse stepped to the water and did not sink. Each hoofprint made a bell note of foam. Ireland tilted behind them like a green bowl turning in slow hands. The air grew bright and tasted faintly of apples and new milk. It is said that seals swam beside them, curious as children. Gulls followed, quiet as if their voices had no work to do in a place so near to blessing. When the mist lifted, a shore appeared that looked like a memory of a shore, familiar and impossibly new. Oisín had the strange feeling that he remembered this place from before he was born. On that shore, time was gentle. Niamh led him through fields where the clover sang when you brushed your hand across it, through orchards that bore fruit and blossom at once, through halls whose walls seemed woven from light. There were feasts without end, and yet nothing felt excessive. Music came like a breeze. When dancers circled, you felt the floor welcome their feet. It might be, based on the way the stories touched this place, that Tír na nÓg held nothing that took without giving. Oisín and Niamh were married there in the knowledge of that land, and the joy they shared did not crowd out peace. He hunted stag that left no sorrow in their passing. He recited verses that tasted like cold water when you were thirsty. He slept and woke without the ache of alarm in his bones. If homesickness pricked him, if the name Boyne rose in his mind like a moth to flame, or if he heard in the courtyard his father's laugh, Niamh's hand in his own quieted him, and the moment flowed on. But the heart remembers what time forgets. Oisín was a man of Ireland, and Ireland is a place where endings matter because they teach us how to keep beginnings. One day he stood on a rise and watched the sky bend toward evening, and he felt a small pain fill his chest, not of loss but of longing for the good that raises a man. He thought of the Funa's camps, the smell of wood smoke hung with venison, the sound of his father's counsel, light when light was needed, stern when sternness saved lives. He thought of the hills that shaped his stride and the river that taught him patience. He turned to Niamh, and he spoke the truth that had been gathering in him like rain. "Beloved," he said, "my joy here is complete, and yet I cannot keep from wondering how my father fares, how my friends wake and sleep, whether Ireland still sings the songs I knew. I ask for leave to visit, only to look upon the land and return." Niamh's eyes were kind, but concern moved in them like a shadow under water. She'd seen this ache before. Tír na nÓg gives peace, but peace can sharpen old love until it becomes a kind of hunger. "You may go," she said gently, "but go carefully. Take the white horse with you. As long as you ride and do not set foot upon mortal ground, you will be safe. Promise me." He promised. Oaths in that land sound different. They ring in the air. Oisín mounted the horse and held Niamh close for a moment that lasted like a blessing. Then he turned toward the path that looked like mist made into a road. The sea rose to meet them, and they crossed it as easily as a thought crosses a mind. Ireland appeared first as scent, salt and heather, then as a green lifting of the horizon, then as a shoreline. He knew the way you know your own name. He rode up through fields where the hedges were a little higher than he remembered, and the lanes a little narrower. The light seemed thinner somehow, as if someone had opened a window to let it go a while ago, and then closed it again. Oisín's heart beat high and fragile in his chest. He looked for the Funa and did not find them. He looked for the marks of their camps and found only grass that had learned to forget. He went to a ring fort that had once been loud with oaths and laughter, and found a farmer mending a fence. The man set down his tools and stared. Oisín called to him, asking after Fionn mac Cúil, after Culta Macronown, after any of the old companions. The farmer's face shifted from suspicion to pity. "Sir," he said, "those names are ancient. The Fiona lived long ago in a time told at fires." The world tilted under Oisín's hands. He felt in his bones time like a wave breaking. The farmer pointed toward a small church of stone at the edge of a wood. "You might speak to the holy man there," he said. "He knows the old stories." Oisín rode on, his breath tight. At the church he found a man some called St. Patrick, a missionary of the new faith that had taken root while Oisín feasted in the land of youth. In early Fenian literature, especially the 12th century Acalmna Shenora X, Patrick chiefly speaks with Culta Macronown. Later poems and romances pair Patrick with Oisín himself. This could imply that the tale you're hearing blends older and newer streams into a single crossing. Patrick's eyes were steady and kind. He had the look of someone who'd crossed seas within himself. He listened as Oisín told his tale, the white horse, the golden-haired bride, the years like mornings. "Time moves differently in the other world," Patrick said softly. "The years you knew as a few seasons were centuries here." He did not smile, and he did not argue. He set no hand to Oisín's shoulder. He knew some losses cannot be comforted by touch. "Tell me about them," he said instead. "Tell me about the Fiona. I will write their names so the wind cannot blow them away." Oisín had never met a man of this new faith before. He had expected hardness and found listening. He spoke of Fionn's wisdom and of hunts that felt like prayers and of winter nights when music kept despair from snowing inside a man. Patrick wrote what he could in letters shaped like small gates. It may be, based on what we know of how stories cross into new ages, that this meeting kept more than a few names alive. They say that as Oisín rode from the church, he saw men struggling to lift a large stone onto a cart. Most late versions include this scene or a close variant, with the warning not to touch the ground. The details shift by region, but the core pattern, falling, touching earth, and aging at once, remains constant. Their faces were red with the effort, their voices were thin with it. Oisín remembered the glad use of strength, and he called to them that he would help. He leaned from the saddle to set his hands to the rock. As he did, the girth strap creaked, a small sound, the kind of sound that means nothing until it means everything, and the saddle shifted. Oisín fell, his feet hit Irish ground. He had kept his oath as long as he could, but the earth he loved would not be satisfied with a glance. The moment his soles kissed the soil, the centuries he'd skipped found him. Age came like weather that had been waiting behind a hill. His hair silvered and thinned, his back bent. His hands trembled as if they had seen snow and harvest both too many times to be counted. The farmers cried out, and St. Patrick, hearing the commotion, hurried from the church. Patrick knelt beside the old man as Shiner had become. He gave him water. He listened to his last words, which were not a complaint but a blessing for his father and for Ireland, the land that had taught him how to be a man and then, at the end, taught him how to let go. Patrick did what scribes do. He bore witness. He carried the story like a lamp into the dark that gathers at the edge of change. Some versions say Oisín converted then and there, his last breath turning toward the new god. Others leave him faithful to the long memory of the land. Based on what we know from the manuscript tradition and later oral poetry, the variation reflects differing aims, didactic in some sources, memorial in others. The texts differ, but the heart of the tale is steady, a bridge between eras, a man who tried to touch both shores. If the old gods were fading, they did not vanish in anger. They thinned like mist. They remained in the curve of hill and the shine of water, in the deer's path through oak and the unseen kindness that keeps a traveller safe a while. The Tuatha became the people of the mounds, and the mounds became the way the land kept its promises. Perhaps that is what happens to divinity when a new story is told. It becomes the story behind the story, the reason the world still feels larger than we can say. Tirnanog remains too, not as a map point, but as a tenderness in the human wish. It is the longing to step out of time when time is cruel, the hope that somewhere there is a meadow where everyone we love waits for us, unwearied. It is the hush that falls when you stand at the lip of the sea, and the horizon looks like a door. It is the soft thing a lullaby does to a child who had a hard day. If the old faith receded like a tide, that shore of youth did not dry up. It only moved, becoming inner weather. Think of Ireland in those years as a room where one lamp is being lit while another is slowly turned down. The new flame does not hate the old one, it simply throws its light differently. Monks learn the names of wells and fold them into calendars of saints. Farmers keep leaving milk on stones because generosity should not end just because the name for it changes. The white horse returns to the sea because the sea is where questions rest when they are not ready to be answered. Oisín's story, held between a pagan dawn and a Christian morning, stays with us because it keeps both lights alive. He is not punished for loving his land, and Niamh is not blamed for loving him. They are the shape of a human choice, the wish to hold joy and duty both, to honour the old and to step into the new. When he falls and ages, it is not a cruelty so much as a truth. Time belongs to the world that raised him, and he belongs to both worlds enough to be claimed by each. Patrick asked Oisín for the names again, and Oisín spoke them like beads on a cord. Fionn, Cíalte, Diarmid, Oscar, Gaul, and others whose stories were fires on winter nights. He told of hunts that were not about killing, but about learning the shapes of hills, of standing watches in storm and feeling kinship with the rain, of music so patient it could unlearn a man's bitterness. Patrick listened. He was a traveller of a different kind, walking roads of doctrine and roads of mercy, but he understood that memory is its own pilgrimage. Based on what we know about how old poems were gathered into later writings, their meeting could imply the very bridge by which the Fenian stories crossed into the age that followed. As Oisín grew weaker, he asked for one last sight of the sea. They carried him there on a cart lined with cloaks. The salt wind raised the grey hair that had been black when he left. He looked west, as if his eyes might open a path. He spoke softly, not to Patrick or the farmers, but to the horizon. If the tide answered, it answered in the language it has always used, a hush over stones, a lifting and setting down that says both yes and no. We keep the old gods alive not by worshipping what has passed, but by loving what they loved. The Tuatha Danann loved this island, and so the island remembers them. A hill is not only a hill, it is a held breath. A lake is not only a lake, it is a kept secret. When the wind presses through gorse and thorn, when a fox looks over its shoulder as if the evening had called its name, when a raven wheels and the air feels slightly more awake, these are the ways a country carries its gods under the skin. You might be asking, quietly, where did Niamh go when Oisín fell? The tales are shy here. Some say she watched from a distance, unable to intervene without breaking the rule that keeps the worlds apart. Some say she waited at the edge of the tide for years that were hours to her, hoping the white horse would return with his weight upon it. Others say she turned her face away, knowing that to pull him back would be to tear him from the belonging he had chosen. Any of these could be true in the way stories are true. They tell us not what happened in time, but what happens in us when we love across a boundary. When the new faith spread, it did not erase the old names, it spoke with them. Wells once held by goddesses received saints' names. Feast days that honoured sunlight and sowing learned new prayers. But a hawthorn bloom remains a hawthorn bloom. A midwinter fire still means hope. The monks who drew lines on vellum also kept gardens, and those gardens still needed rain, and rain still answers no creed and all creeds. This could imply that Ireland did not trade one world for another, so much as learn to speak the same reverence in two languages at once. If you walk the Barren in County Clare, a limestone country like a quiet lunar sea, you can feel how stone remembers pressure. The slabs fit together like forgotten pages. Orchids bloom in their slots of soil as if delicate things had made a treaty with austerity. On such ground it is not hard to believe that passages remain, not in the rock but in us. The other world is a way of seeing held as carefully as a flame cupped from the wind. Children keep it best. Poets and older women with weatherwise eyes keep it next. Think of Tir na Og again, because it is more than a destination in a single story. It is a compass lane in the Irish heart. It says, do not hurry so much that you forget to taste the air. Do not harden so much that you cannot be moved by a shadow of music from a field you thought was empty. It is the promise that gentleness is not naive but ancestral. It is an orchard in the mind where grief can sit down and eat and be patient with itself. There are other islands of the blessed named in the old songs, Mogmel, the Plain of Delight, Emanablax, the Isle of Apples. Some hear in them the echo of far travellers describing warmer seas and kinder winters. Others hear only the soul's own geography. Based on what we know of how seafaring and imagination braid together, both readings can live side by side. The important thing is not which chart you use, but that you do not forget your way to wonder. The story of Oisín circles back upon itself like tide lines that meet, and each time it returns there is some new gentleness in it. One telling says that Patrick asked Oisín to abandon the old ways, and Oisín answered that he would not abandon his father. Another says that Patrick honoured Oisín's love and, in honouring it, found a better hearing for his own message. What we can say, without forcing the matter, is that their meeting allowed room for both grief and blessing. That room is the real miracle. A day will come, the old storytellers say, when the Tuatha Dé Danann will ride out again, not to seize a throne but to stand once more where mystery is needed. While no single text fixes such a return, the expectation appears as a recurring hope in later folklore, which may suggest a cultural way of honouring what lingers rather than ends. If that day never comes in the manner of a parade, perhaps it comes each time a child hears a name like Manannan or Brigid and feels the spine pleasantly prickle as if a door had opened the finger's width. It may be that the ride of the gods is not a cavalry, but a kindness entering a town unnoticed. In this twilight between ages, let us walk slowly. Hear the blackbird stitching dusk with its bright thread. Smell turf smoke from a cottage where an old kettle whispers. Look toward a hill that is only a hill until someone you love says its name, and then it becomes a home. If you feel the hush that comes to a lane when the hedges lean close and the sky keeps a secret, do not argue with it. Agreement is a kind of seeing. Bow your head in that small chapel of air and carry on. I would like to tell you one more fireside story before we close. It belongs to no manuscript I can cite, but it sits faithfully beside the written ones. A fisherman on the west coast, old enough to know better and young enough to try anyway, went out in a fog against his good sense. He heard bells where there were no churches, and he saw lights under the water move with the discipline of a procession. He did not cast his nets. He held his oars still and let the sea right on his boat's skin without complaint. When the fog thinned, he had nothing to sell, but his hands were steady, and his face looked younger by the width of a thought. He told no one what he saw, because some mercies diminish when they are weighed. If you ask him now, he will deflect with a joke about navigational errors, but you will notice that he always leaves a bit of bread on the pier before he goes out. We keep stories so they can keep us. The tale of Oisín and Niamh is not on the map, but it is in the gait of people who know that love sometimes asks us to wait longer than we want to, and that waiting done well is a kind of mastery. It is in the way an Irish grandmother looks out at rain and says almost fondly, as if to a relative, "There you are." It is in the patience of moss around a gate hinge, in the pride of a stonemason who sets each block as if aligning a star. If you stand where river meets sea, the water carries two knowings at once. The river knows its source and carries silt like the handwriting of hills. The sea knows the moon and carries distance without complaint. Where they touch is a place for thinking. Oisín belonged to both, river and sea, time and no time, and he broke only when he tried to live one while touching the other. We all learn this in our own smaller ways. We try to hold a childhood summer in a grown winter, a first love in a second life, a name in a language that has shifted its sounds. The lesson is not to let go of love, but to let love shape itself to the season. It is said that the white horse still runs the strand some evenings when the tide is making, its hooves not quite touching the sand, its mane not quite taking the wind. If you see it, do not give chase. Gifts offered by the borderlands ask to be received, not pursued. Bow your head and let the sight pass through you like clean light through glass. Later, when you pour milk on a doorstep, do not say for whom it is. The one who needs it will know. There are people who hear all of this and smile kindly but keep their feet planted on what they call solid ground. That is all right. A country needs its farmers of facts as much as its keepers of songs. Yet even the most practical among us has had a day when a hedge rustled and the heart behaved as if addressed by a friend. We turn to check, and of course no one is there. But of course someone is. The island itself walks beside us, and the old stories give it a voice we can hear without fear. Think of how the new faith took hold, not by force of numbers alone, but by telling a story whose centre was love that continues through death. The old stories did not fight that. They bowed to it as a hawthorn bowing to a wind that does not break it. In time, the two streams ran together, and what we call Irishness learned to carry sorrow and joy without choosing between them. Patrick and Oisín are not enemies in this. They are witnesses standing at opposite banks of the same water, each calling to the other what he sees. So what do we do with Tír na nÓg in a century of screens and schedules? We keep a small hour at the edge of day when we let time be kind. We walk without earphones once in a while and notice how the world makes its own music. We light a candle when we have more questions than answers and wait until the flame is steadied before we speak. We learn a name of a wind and a name of a wildflower and feel less alone because of it. We give a little food to a doorstep and ask no report in return. This could imply that the technology we carry is not our only lantern. If you're listening to this in bed, with the window open to night air and the soft hum of a city or the farther hush of fields, let your shoulders settle. You do not have to agree with every detail to be companioned by it. The story is not a theology exam, but a blanket held just right. If you need a luck to sleep, take the image of the white horse crossing the sea. If you need courage for tomorrow, take Oisín naming his friends for the scribe so that the next age would not forget them. If you need permission to be tender with yourself, take Niamh's hand in your own and let it be enough that you are loved in a place outside of time. I will tell you one last small thing and then I will let the dark do the rest of its kind work. On the coast of County Donegal, where cliffs are a language and wind has its own religion, there is a field that children say belongs to the fair folk. No one sows it, no one fences it. But every year there are blackberries along its edges so sweet they make silence in the mouth. A neighbour lady, older than anyone's memory of her, leaves a jar of cream there each Midsummer's Eve. She does not call it an offering. She calls it courtesy. She says it keeps her house free of spite and her dreams free of storms. She says when you treat the unseen kindly, the seen learns how to behave. Patrick's letters fade, vellum browns, and yet the names he shaped remain. Fionn and Oisín walk on in the speech of school children and in the songs that waft from pubs when the door opens and in the quiet pride of people who fix things without a fuss. Niamh of the golden hair rides the shoreline each time a cloud's edge makes the sea gold for a minute and vanishes again. Manannan MacLear's cloak is every fog that turns familiar lanes into mystery just long enough to make us pay attention. The Tuatha Danann are every kindness we cannot explain, and every coincidence that saves us time we did not deserve. As for Tir na Nog, perhaps it is not lost across the horizon. Perhaps it is a way of keeping watch, making enough room in the day for a friend's story, letting an elder repeat a tale and hearing it as if it were newly minted, letting a child teach you the rules of a game and obeying them with the seriousness due a treaty. Eternal youth is not refusing to age, it is refusing to stop being teachable. We've walked a long way together tonight, from the hill of the gods to the church by the wood, from a white horse's bright wake to a farmer's bent field, from a boy's first wonder to an old man's last blessing. If your eyes are heavy, let the next part be a dream. If you are awake, keep the quiet like a cup of warm milk for your thoughts. Thank you for wandering with me through this twilight between worlds, for keeping company with Oisín and Niamh, with Fionn and Patrick, with the Tuatha Dé Danann and the patient sea that holds their crossings. If this story kept you gentle, if it set your breathing to the rhythm of waves, if it gave you back a name you had not said aloud in years, I'm grateful. If you'd like to linger with me in more tales like this, softly told, carefully kept, please like this video so it finds other wanderers, subscribe to the channel so you can return to the fire anytime, and ring the bell so the next story will find you wherever you are. Until then, may your road be kind, may your sleep be deep, and may you dream of a white horse stepping lightly over water, while the horizon opens like a door. I will meet you again under the starlight of another tale.